The wrench slipped from my grease-stained fingers and clattered against the concrete floor of my garage. Through the open bay door, headlights swept across my driveway like searchlights hunting for prey. It was past midnight, and I'd been working on my 1969 GTO, trying to lose myself in the familiar rhythm of restoration work. The engine bay was my sanctuary, the only place where things still made sense. My wife Penelope stumbled out of an Uber, her designer heels clicking against the asphalt. She wasn't alone. A tall guy in an expensive suit followed her, carrying 2 suitcases and wearing the kind of confident smirk that made my jaw clench. "Derek?" Penny called out, her voice carrying that artificial sweetness she used when she was about to drop a bomb. "Come meet Jason. He's going to be staying with us for a while." I wiped my hands on a shop rag and stepped into the driveway. The autumn air was crisp, carrying the scent of dying leaves and the faint smell of Penny's perfume mixed with something else, cologne that definitely wasn't mine. "Staying with us?" I repeated, keeping my voice level. 22 years of marriage had taught me to read the warning signs, and every alarm bell in my head was screaming. Jason extended his hand with the kind of firm grip that screamed corporate climber. "Great to meet you, Derek. Penny's told me so much about you. I really appreciate you letting me crash here while I get back on my feet." The guest house sat behind our main residence, a converted garage apartment I'd built myself 5 years ago. We'd talked about renting it out but never got around to it. Now I understood why Penny had been so insistent about keeping it empty. "Jason's going through a difficult divorce," Penny explained, her eyes not quite meeting mine. "He needs somewhere quiet to stay. You know how I feel about helping people in tough situations." I knew exactly how she felt about helping certain people, especially tall, handsome ones with expensive suits and the kind of smile that belonged in toothpaste commercials. "The guest house has everything he needs," I said, surprising myself with how calm I sounded. "Full kitchen, separate entrance, private parking, very private." Penny's shoulders relaxed slightly. She'd been expecting a fight, but I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction. Not yet. "I'll pay rent, of course," Jason added quickly. "Fair market value. I run a tech consulting firm, so money isn't an issue." "Don't worry about it," I replied, watching Penny's face carefully. "Consider it a favor. For Penny." The look that passed between them lasted exactly 3 seconds too long. 3 seconds that confirmed what I'd suspected for months. The late nights at work, the new clothes, the way she'd started keeping her phone face down during dinner. "Well, this is wonderful," Penny said, practically glowing with relief. "Jason, let me show you around. Derek, you don't mind finishing up out here, do you? We have some things to discuss about the arrangement." I watched them walk toward the guest house, Penny's hand briefly touching Jason's arm as she pointed out features of the property. My property. The place I'd worked 60-hour weeks to afford, the home I'd renovated with my own hands, the sanctuary I'd built for the woman who was now giving guided tours to her boyfriend. But instead of rage, I felt something else settling in my chest, a cold, calculating calm that surprised me. Penny wanted me to accept this situation? Fine. I'd accept it. I'd accept it so completely that she'd never see what was coming. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to my brother Alex's contact. He was a real estate attorney with a practice downtown, and more importantly, he was the only person I trusted completely. The phone rang twice before his groggy voice answered. "Derek? It's past midnight, what's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong," I said, watching the lights come on in the guest house. "But I need to ask you something about property law. Hypothetically, if someone wanted to transfer ownership of a house to avoid certain complications, how quickly could that happen?" Alex was quiet for a moment. "Hypothetically? With the right paperwork and no liens, maybe 72 hours? But Derek, what kind of complications are we talking about?" "The kind where my wife just moved her boyfriend into our guest house and expects me to smile about it." Jesus. Are you serious? "Completely. And Alex?" This stays between us until I say otherwise. Of course. But Derek, are you sure you want to go down this road? There might be other options. I watched Jason's silhouette move past the guest house window, already making himself at home. I'm sure. Can you meet me tomorrow morning, early? 8 a.m. at my office. And Derek, don't do anything stupid tonight. Don't worry. I'm going to be the most understanding husband in the world. After hanging up, I stood in my driveway for a long moment, listening to the distant sound of voices from the guest house. Penny's laugh drifted across the yard, light and carefree, in a way I hadn't heard in months. She was happy, relaxed, finally able to stop pretending. I walked back into the garage and picked up my wrench. The GTO's engine still needed work, and I had a feeling I was going to need plenty of late-night projects to keep my hands busy over the next few weeks. Because if Penny thought she could rewrite the rules of our marriage without consequences, she was about to learn something about the man she'd been living with for over 2 decades. I'd built this house. I'd earned every square foot of it. And I was about to teach both of them exactly what that meant. The smell of bacon filled the kitchen the next morning as I prepared what had to be the most passive-aggressive breakfast of my life. 3 place settings on the kitchen island, fresh orange juice, coffee brewing in the machine I'd bought Penny for her last birthday. I even put out the good napkins. Penny appeared first, looking surprisingly well-rested for someone who'd been out until midnight. She wore one of her power suits, navy blue with a silk blouse that probably cost more than most people's car payments. Her marketing firm paid well, but not well enough for the lifestyle she'd been living lately. Now I understood where the extra money was coming from. "Good morning," she said cautiously, probably expecting some kind of confrontation about the previous night. "Morning, beautiful," I replied, sliding a plate of eggs and bacon across the counter. "Sleep well?" Her eyebrows rose slightly. "Yes, actually. Thank you for being so understanding about Jason. I know it's an unusual situation." "Life's full of unusual situations. The key is adapting." Jason emerged from the guest house just as I was plating his breakfast. He'd traded the expensive suit for designer jeans and a polo shirt that probably cost more than I made in a day. Even his casual clothes screamed money. "Derek, this is incredibly generous," he said, accepting the plate with what seemed like genuine gratitude. "Most guys wouldn't be so cool about their wife's friend crashing at their place." "Friend?" I repeated, savoring the word. "Right. Penny collects interesting friends." The 3 of us ate in surprisingly comfortable silence. I asked Jason about his consulting business, nodded sympathetically when he mentioned his divorce proceedings, even offered to help him move his remaining belongings from storage. Penny kept glancing between us like she was watching a tennis match, waiting for the explosion that never came. "I have to run," she announced, checking her phone. "Client meeting at 9. Jason, we're still on for lunch?" "Absolutely. That new place downtown?" "Perfect." "Derek, you don't mind if I borrow Jason for a few hours? He's helping me with some marketing strategy ideas." "Of course not. You two have fun." After they left, together in Penny's BMW, I cleaned up the breakfast dishes and headed to Alex's office. The law firm occupied the top 3 floors of a downtown building, all glass and steel, and the kind of understated wealth that comes from knowing exactly how the system works. Alex was waiting in his conference room with a stack of legal documents and 2 cups of coffee that smelled like they cost more than my entire breakfast. "You look terrible," he said by way of greeting. "Thanks. You always know just what to say." "I'm serious. When's the last time you slept?" "Sleep's overrated. Tell me about property transfers." Alex leaned back in his leather chair, studying me with the expression he probably used on clients who were about to make expensive mistakes. "Before we start, I need to know you're thinking clearly. What you're considering, it's nuclear. Once we do this, there's no going back." "There's already no going back. She moved him in, Alex, into our guest house. She's not even trying to hide it anymore." "Have you considered counseling? Separation? There are other ways to handle this." She made her choice. Now I'm making mine. Alex opened the first folder. Okay, here's how it works. You sign a quitclaim deed transferring full ownership to me. I pay you $1. That's the legal consideration required. The transfer gets recorded at the county office, usually within 72 hours. Once it's official, I become the sole owner with full rights to determine who lives on the property. And then? Then I can issue eviction notices to any unauthorized occupants. Since neither Penny nor her boyfriend have lease agreements or legal right to occupy the property, they'd have 30 days to vacate. What about Penny's claim as my spouse? That's the beautiful part. She never owned the property. It was purchased before your marriage, and you never added her to the deed. Legally, she's been living there as your guest for 22 years. Generous of you, really. I stared at the documents spread across the conference table. Decades of marriage reduced to legal paperwork and property law. How much will this cost me? The filing fees are minimal, a few $100s. But Derek, the real cost isn't financial. You sure you want to do this? She's having lunch with him right now, probably telling him how easy I was to handle, how I just rolled over and accepted their arrangement. Yeah, I'm sure. Alex slid a pen across the table. Then sign here and here. Initial there. My signature looked strange on the legal documents, like someone else's handwriting. But with each stroke of the pen, I felt something shifting inside me. Not anger, but a cold satisfaction that was almost frightening in its intensity. How long before it's official? I asked. Monday morning, assuming no complications. I'll have the eviction notices prepared and ready to serve by Thursday. Thursday, I repeated. Penny's going to lose her mind. That's the idea, isn't it? I gathered my copies of the paperwork and stood to leave. Alex? Thanks for this. I know it's not exactly standard family law. You're my brother. Besides, I never liked her anyway. You never liked anyone I dated. True, but I especially never liked her. The drive home took me through the neighborhood where Penny and I had built our life together. Tree-lined streets with manicured lawns, the kind of suburban paradise that looked perfect from the outside. I'd always been proud of what we'd accomplished here, the way we'd climbed from a tiny apartment to this comfortable middle-class existence. Now it all felt like a stage set for someone else's life. When I pulled into the driveway, Jason's rental car was parked in front of the guest house, a silver BMW sedan that probably cost more than I made in 6 months. The man definitely had money, which explained part of his appeal. Penny had always been attracted to success, and I'd been working longer hours lately just to keep up with her spending habits. I found him on the guest house patio, talking on his phone in the kind of animated voice that suggested a business deal in progress. He waved when he saw me, holding up one finger to indicate he'd be finished soon. Absolutely. The market analysis shows tremendous potential. We're talking about disrupting an entire industry here. He paused, listening. No, the living situation is perfect. Very accommodating landlord. I couldn't ask for a better setup. Accommodating landlord. The phrase echoed in my head as I walked back to my garage. In 3 days, Jason was going to discover just how accommodating I really was. Sunday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn weather that usually made me grateful to be alive. Penny was still sleeping when I started my coffee routine, and Jason's rental car was absent from its usual spot, probably an early morning run, based on the expensive running gear I'd seen him wearing yesterday. The house felt different now that I knew it wouldn't be mine much longer. Every room held memories that seemed to belong to someone else. The kitchen, where Penny and I had shared breakfast for over 2 decades. The living room where we'd watched countless movies. The bedroom where we'd planned our future together. By the time Penny emerged, I'd already finished reading the entire Sunday paper and started prep work for what I'd decided would be my signature pancakes, the ones I used to make when we were newlyweds and couldn't afford to eat out. You're up early, she observed, accepting the coffee mug I offered. Couldn't sleep. Figured I'd make a real breakfast for once. That's sweet. Jason will appreciate it. He was just saying yesterday how much he misses home cooking. Was he now? And what else was Jason saying yesterday? Penny's hand paused halfway to her mouth. Just general conversation. He's very easy to talk to. I'm sure he is. Must be nice having someone who really listens. The comment hung in the air between us, loaded with implications neither of us was ready to address directly. Instead, Penny busied herself with her phone while I continued cooking, the familiar rhythm of domestic life playing out like a scene from a marriage that had ended months ago. Jason appeared just as I was plating the pancakes, looking like he'd stepped out of a fitness magazine. His running clothes were perfectly coordinated, his hair barely mussed despite what had obviously been several miles of exercise. "Derek, you're spoiling me," he said, accepting a plate with enthusiasm that seemed genuine. "I haven't had a home-cooked breakfast in months." "Divorce will do that to you," I replied. "Speaking of which, how are the proceedings going?" "Slowly. My lawyer says these things take time, especially when there are assets to divide." Assets can be tricky. Sometimes you think you own something, and it turns out the situation is more complicated than you realized. Jason nodded absently, focused on his pancakes. But Penny was watching me with the expression she got when she suspected I was planning something. After 22 years, she knew my moods better than anyone. "Derek's been in a strange mood lately," she told Jason, very philosophical. "Change will do that to a person," I said. "Makes you think about what really matters." The rest of breakfast passed in comfortable small talk. Jason's business ventures, Penny's upcoming marketing campaign, my plans for the day. To any outside observer, we probably looked like old friends sharing a Sunday morning meal. The perfect picture of modern domestic harmony. After they left for what Penny described as errands, but which I suspected was something more intimate, I spent the afternoon in my garage working on the GTO. The engine was finally running smooth, all the pieces fitting together exactly as they should. There was something satisfying about mechanical problems. They had clear solutions, logical steps that led to predictable outcomes. Unlike marriages, which seemed to operate on entirely different principles. My phone buzzed with a text from Alex. "Paperwork filed. Should be official by tomorrow afternoon. You still sure about this?" I typed back, "Never been more sure of anything." "Eviction notices ready to serve Thursday morning. Fair warning, this is going to get ugly." "It's already ugly. I'm just making it honest." Monday morning brought the first real test of my resolve. Penny left early for a breakfast meeting, kissing my cheek with the kind of casual affection that had once meant everything to me. Jason emerged from the guest house looking like he owned the place, which I suppose he thought he did. "Thanks again for this arrangement," he said, loading his laptop bag into his rental car. "I know it's not conventional, but it's really helping me get back on my feet." "Happy to help. How long do you think you'll need the space?" "Hard to say. My lawyer thinks the divorce could drag on for months. But don't worry, I'm not planning to overstay my welcome. I wouldn't worry about that if I were you." He drove away with a casual wave, probably headed to whatever consulting work kept him in expensive cars and designer clothes. I watched until his taillights disappeared around the corner, then went inside to wait for Alex's call. It came at 2:47 p.m. "It's official," he said without preamble. "The deed transfer is recorded. I am now the sole owner of your former property." "Former property?" I repeated. "That sounds strange. You want to back out? I can transfer it back just as easily." "No, let's finish this. Eviction notices will be served Thursday morning at 9 a.m. Professional process server completely by the book. They'll have 30 days to vacate, but most people leave much sooner once they realize the legal situation. And if they don't? Then we proceed with formal eviction proceedings. But Derek, it won't come to that. Once Penny understands what happened, she'll have no choice but to accept it." That evening, I cooked dinner for 3 again. Penny arrived home in a good mood, chattering about her successful day, while Jason contributed stories from his consulting work. They had the easy rapport of people who'd been spending a lot of time together, finishing each other's sentences and sharing inside jokes that excluded me completely. But I didn't feel excluded. I felt like I was watching actors in a play, performing roles that would be irrelevant by the end of the week. "Derek, you're quiet tonight," Penny observed. "Everything okay?" "Just thinking about the future, how quickly things can change." "Change can be good," Jason added. "Sometimes you have to shake things up to find out what really matters." "Exactly," I agreed. "Sometimes the universe has a way of clarifying situations that seemed complicated." Penny frowned slightly. "You're being cryptic again." "Am I? I thought I was being perfectly clear." After dinner, I excused myself to work in the garage while they settled in to watch a movie together. Through the window, I could see them on the couch, not quite touching, but close enough that their intentions were obvious. Penny laughed at something Jason said, the sound carrying across the yard like music from someone else's life. Tomorrow was Wednesday. Thursday would bring the eviction notices, and by Friday, everything would be different. I turned back to my workbench and picked up a wrench. The GTO's engine was purring like a contented cat, all the pieces finally working in perfect harmony. Sometimes the best solutions were the simplest ones. You just had to be willing to take apart everything you'd built and put it back together the right way. The process server arrived at exactly 9 a.m., just as Alex had promised. I watched from my kitchen window as a professional-looking woman in a business suit approached the guest house with a manila envelope in her hand. She knocked twice, waited, then knocked again with more authority. Jason answered the door in a bathrobe, his hair disheveled from sleep. Even from a distance, I could see his confusion as the woman introduced herself and handed him the legal documents. He accepted them with the kind of bewildered expression people get when their world suddenly stops making sense. The process server was thorough. She waited while Jason signed the receipt, explained his legal obligations in clear, professional language, then handed him a business card before walking back to her car. The entire transaction took less than 5 minutes. I was pouring my second cup of coffee when Jason knocked on my back door. He'd thrown on jeans and a t-shirt, but his feet were still bare and his face had the pale, shocked look of someone who'd just received very bad news. "Derek, I need to ask you something," he said, holding up the eviction notice. "Did you know about this?" "Know about what?" "This legal notice. It says I have 30 days to vacate the property, but it's not from you. It's from someone named Alex Morrison. Alex is my brother. He's a lawyer. Your brother owns this house?" "Apparently so. Coffee?" Jason stared at me like I'd started speaking a foreign language. "I don't understand. Penny said you owned the property." "Penny says a lot of things. She's not always current on the legal details. But you live here. This is your house." "I rent from my brother now. It's a recent arrangement." Jason sat down heavily at the kitchen counter, the eviction notice spread out in front of him like evidence of a crime he couldn't quite comprehend. "When did this happen?" "Does it matter? The important thing is that you have 30 days to find alternative housing. That's very generous, legally speaking." "This is insane. Penny's going to lose her mind when she finds out." "Probably. She's not great with surprises." Jason's phone started ringing, Penny's ringtone, which I recognized from countless dinner interruptions. He answered with shaking hands. "Penny? We have a problem, a big problem." He paused, listening. "No, I can't explain over the phone. You need to come home, now." While we waited for Penny to arrive, Jason read through the eviction notice 3 times, as if repetition might change the legal language. I made toast and offered him some, which he declined with the distracted air of someone whose appetite had completely disappeared. "I don't understand how this happened," he said finally. "Penny never mentioned that you didn't own the house." "Penny doesn't handle the financial details. She leaves that kind of thing to me." "But you're married. Don't you own property jointly?" "Not necessarily. The house was purchased before our marriage. I never saw the need to complicate the ownership structure. And now your brother owns it? Family business can be complicated. Penny's BMW screeched into the driveway 20 minutes later. She burst through the back door like a force of nature, her professional composure completely shattered. "What is this?" she demanded, snatching the eviction notice from Jason's hands. "What kind of joke is this?" "It's not a joke," I said calmly. "It's a legal document." "From your brother? Since when does Alex own our house?" "Since Monday afternoon. The deed transfer was recorded at 2:47 p.m. The color drained from Penny's face as the implications hit her. "You transferred the house to Alex? Without telling me?" "I didn't need to tell you. It was my property to transfer. We're married, this is our home. Actually, it was my home. You were living here as my guest, now you're living here as Alex's guest, and he's decided to terminate that arrangement." Penny sank into a chair, the eviction notice trembling in her hands. "This is vindictive. This is cruel. This is legal. You can't do this, I'll fight it. I'll get a lawyer." "You should definitely get a lawyer. They'll explain property law to you. It's actually quite straightforward." Jason had been silent during this exchange, but now he stood up abruptly. "I should pack my things." "That's probably wise," I agreed. "Jason, wait," Penny said desperately. "We can figure this out. There has to be something we can do." "Like what? The man owns the property. He can evict whoever he wants." "My brother owns the property," I corrected. "I'm just a tenant now." "This is insane," Penny repeated. "Derek, we can work this out. We can talk about this like adults. We are talking about it. You wanted Jason to move in, and I accepted that. Now Alex wants Jason to move out, and you'll have to accept that." "But why? Why would you do this?" I looked at my wife, really looked at her, for what felt like the first time in months. She was still beautiful, still the woman I'd fallen in love with all those years ago. But she was also a stranger who'd been lying to me, manipulating me, treating me like an obstacle to be managed rather than a partner to be respected. "Because you asked me to accept an unacceptable situation," I said finally. "So I changed the situation into something I could accept." By giving away our house? By clarifying who actually owned the house. Turns out it was never ours to begin with. Jason cleared his throat awkwardly. "I'm going to start packing. Penny, we'll figure out the next steps later." After he left, Penny and I sat in silence for a long moment. The kitchen felt enormous, with just the two of us, like a stage set after the other actors had gone home. "How long have you known?" she asked finally. "About Jason? Months? About the others before Jason? Longer?" "There weren't any others." "Penny, please, don't insult both of our intelligence." She started crying then, not the dramatic sobs I'd expected, but quiet tears that seemed to come from somewhere deep and broken inside her. "I never meant for it to happen this way," she whispered. "How did you mean for it to happen?" "I don't know. I just know I wasn't happy. I haven't been happy for a long time." "So you decided to be happy with someone else, in my house, with my permission." "It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. You wanted to have your cake and eat it too. Well, congratulations. You got exactly what you asked for." Penny wiped her eyes with a kitchen towel, trying to pull herself together. "What happens now?" "Now Jason finds somewhere else to live. You decide whether you want to stay married to me or not, and I decide whether I want to stay married to you. And if I want to work on our marriage? Then we work on it, somewhere else. This house belongs to Alex now, and he's made it clear that he doesn't want tenants who don't respect the property. I can't believe you did this. I can't believe you thought I wouldn't." The rest of the day passed in a blur of awkward conversations and packing sounds from the guest house. Jason loaded his rental car with methodical efficiency, avoiding eye contact with both of us. By evening, he was gone, leaving behind only a brief note thanking us for our hospitality and apologizing for any inconvenience. Penny read the note twice, then crumpled it up and threw it in the trash. Satisfied? She asked. Getting there. What's that supposed to mean? It means this is just the beginning, Penny. You wanted to change the rules of our marriage, fine, but you don't get to be the only one making changes. That night, I slept better than I had in months. The house felt different, cleaner somehow, like a fever had finally broken. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new conversations, new decisions about what our marriage could become. But tonight, for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was living in my own life again. Friday morning brought an unexpected visitor. I was working in the garage when a black Mercedes pulled into my driveway, and Jason stepped out looking like he'd slept in his car. His expensive clothes were wrinkled, his usual confidence replaced by something that looked almost desperate. "Derek, we need to talk," he said without preamble. "I thought we covered everything yesterday." "Not everything, not by a long shot." I wiped my hands on a shop rag and studied him. The polished consultant was gone, replaced by someone who looked genuinely rattled. "What's on your mind, Jason?" "This whole situation, it's not what you think." "Really? What do I think?" "That Penny and I were having an affair, that we were playing you for a fool." "Weren't you?" Jason ran his hands through his hair, a gesture that would have been perfectly groomed yesterday, but now just looked frantic. "It's complicated." "Most things are. Explain it to me." "Penny was unhappy. She told me about your marriage, how distant you'd become, how you never talked anymore. So you decided to comfort her." "I decided to listen to her. Do you know how long it's been since someone really listened to your wife?" The question hit harder than I'd expected. "Enlighten me." "She said you came home from work, ate dinner in silence, then disappeared into this garage for hours. She said she felt like she was living with a stranger." "And you offered to fix that?" "I offered to be her friend, someone she could talk to. In our guest house. Very convenient for friendship." Jason's shoulders sagged. "Look, I'm not going to pretend it didn't develop into something more. But it wasn't planned. It wasn't some scheme to take advantage of you. What was it then? Two lonely people finding comfort with each other." "Lonely," I repeated. Penny was lonely. In the house I bought, eating food I paid for, sleeping in the bed I shared with her for 22 years. When's the last time you really talked to her, Derek? When's the last time you asked her about her dreams, her fears, what she wanted out of life? The question hung in the air between us like an accusation. Because the truth was, I couldn't remember. Somewhere along the way, Penny and I had stopped being partners and started being roommates, sharing space but not much else. "That doesn't justify what you did," I said finally. "No, it doesn't. But it explains it." "And what about your divorce? The sob story about needing a place to stay?" Jason had the grace to look embarrassed. "That part was true. My wife left me 6 months ago, found out about someone else." "Someone else like Penny?" "Someone else like Penny." I stared at him for a long moment, processing this information. "So you're a serial cheater who targeted my unhappy wife." "I'm a guy who's bad at being alone and worse at making good decisions. But Derek, I never wanted to hurt you." "Yet here we are." "Here we are," he agreed. We stood in awkward silence for a moment, two men who'd somehow become enemies over a woman who'd stopped being happy with either of us. "What do you want from me, Jason?" "I want you to know that Penny loves you. Whatever happened between us, she never stopped loving you. She has a funny way of showing it. She was trying to get your attention. The whole thing, moving me in, being obvious about it. She wanted you to fight for her. Instead, I evicted you both. Instead, you evicted us both." The irony wasn't lost on me. Penny had wanted passion, drama, some sign that I still cared enough to be jealous. Instead, she'd gotten legal documents and property law. "Where is she now?" I asked. "Hotel downtown. She's been there since yesterday. And you? Same hotel, different room before you ask. I wasn't going to ask. She wants to see you, to talk. We talked yesterday. You served her with eviction papers yesterday. That's not the same thing. Jason was right, though I wasn't ready to admit it. The conversation with Penny had been about logistics, legalities, the practical details of unraveling a shared life. We hadn't talked about feelings, about what had gone wrong between us, about whether anything could be salvaged from the wreckage of our marriage. What would be the point? I asked. The point would be figuring out if you still love each other enough to fix this. Do we? I don't know. But don't you think you owe it to 22 years of marriage to find out? After Jason left, I spent the rest of the morning thinking about his words. The garage felt different now, less like a sanctuary and more like a hiding place. How many hours had I spent out here over the years, tinkering with engines while my marriage slowly fell apart in the house behind me? At noon, I called the hotel downtown and asked for Penny's room. She answered on the first ring, as if she'd been waiting by the phone. Derek? We should talk. Really talk this time. I'd like that. Not at the hotel, too public. Meet me at the lake house. We'd bought the small cabin on Morrison Lake 15 years ago, back when we still did things together, still planned for a future that included shared dreams and lazy weekends away from the city. We hadn't been there in over a year. I'll be there in an hour, she said. The drive to the lake gave me time to think about what I wanted to say, what questions I needed to ask, what outcomes I could live with. The autumn trees were brilliant against the gray sky, their colors so intense they almost hurt to look at. Everything was changing, dying, preparing for winter. Maybe that was appropriate. Penny's BMW was already in the gravel driveway when I arrived. She was sitting on the cabin's front porch, looking out at the water with the kind of stillness that suggested deep thought. She'd changed from her business clothes into jeans and a sweater, looking more like the woman I'd married than the stranger she'd become. "Thank you for coming," she said as I approached. "Thank you for agreeing to talk." We went inside, and I started a fire in the stone fireplace while Penny made coffee in the tiny kitchen. The familiar domestic routine felt both comforting and heartbreaking, a reminder of what we'd once been together. "Jason came to see me this morning," I said, once we were settled in front of the fire. "I know. He told me he was going to. He said some interesting things. Such as? That you were trying to get my attention. That the whole affair was some kind of cry for help." Penny stared into her coffee mug for a long moment. "He's not wrong. So this was all some elaborate plan to make me jealous?" "Not planned, but when I realized you weren't going to fight for me, weren't going to demand that I choose between you and him." She shrugged. "I guess I got my answer about how much our marriage meant to you. And when I evicted you both instead of fighting, I realized I'd been asking the wrong question. Which was, whether you still loved me enough to fight for me, when the real question was whether we still loved each other enough to fight for us." The fire crackled in the silence that followed. Outside, the lake was gray and choppy, reflecting the overcast sky like a mirror of the mood inside the cabin. "Do we?" I asked finally. "I don't know. Do you still love me, Derek?" "I love the woman I married. I'm not sure who you've become. I'm the same person. I just got tired of being invisible. You were never invisible to me. When's the last time we had a real conversation? When's the last time you asked me about my work, my dreams, what I was thinking about?" I opened my mouth to answer, then closed it again, because she was right. Somewhere along the way, we'd stopped being curious about each other, stopped making the effort to stay connected. "I thought you were happy," I said finally. "I thought you were happy too. Turns out we were both wrong. So what do we do now?" Penny set down her coffee mug and looked directly at me for the first time since I'd arrived. "I think we start over. Not the marriage. That's broken, maybe beyond repair. But the conversation. the effort to understand each other. And Jason? Jason was a mistake, a symptom of the problem, not the cause of it. The cause being? Two people who stopped trying to be married and started just living parallel lives in the same house. The truth of it settled between us like a weight. We'd both been guilty of taking our marriage for granted, of assuming that love was enough without the work that love required. I transferred the house to Alex, I said. I know. I can't transfer it back, even if I wanted to. I know that too. So where does that leave us? Penny smiled for the first time since I'd arrived, not the bright, artificial smile she used at work, but something smaller and more genuine. It leaves us homeless and married to each other. We'll have to figure out what that means. Together? If you want to try. I looked around the cabin, at the fireplace we'd built together, the furniture we'd chosen together, the life we'd created in this small space away from the complications of the world. It wasn't much, but it was ours in a way the house had never quite been. We could stay here for a while, I said. Figure things out. Both of us? Both of us. Penny nodded slowly. I'd like that. Outside, the first drops of rain began to fall on the lake, sending ripples across the gray surface. Inside, my wife and I sat by the fire and began the long, difficult work of learning how to be married to each other again. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. It wasn't a happy ending. There was too much damage for that. But it was a beginning, which was more than either of us had expected when the week began. Sometimes that's enough.